Okay, I thought I would put together this little video on how I went about restoring some of this track that was made by a company called Doepke back in the 50s. I think they made toys as well, like toy trucks. This was a product called Yardbird. It was a hand crank car that you could ride around the track. Anyway, I had quite a bit of this track, and some of it was in very poor condition, and some of it was in decent condition. So I decided to go ahead and try to find some information out about, what it took to repair and fix it. And I learned a little bit, and I thought, well, I put together this real short little video on helping you out. Anyway, what you see here are 8 pieces of curve in the back. Uh, that track will make a diameter of about 13 feet. I also have 4 pieces of long track and 4 pieces of short track. And that just so I can make the oval bigger or whatever size I want. Also in the foreground is some extra pieces of track that it's actually rail without ties that I had left over. So anyway, what I've got here are 2 pieces of this rail. Uh, the long rail came in 2 different lengths. Uh, the long piece came at 64 inches approximately, and the short piece at 57 3/4. What you could do is you could make yourself a short straight or a long straight by 2 pieces of each rail. Or if you put the two together, you could create a curve by using a short and a long together. And that's how you make curved track. Each pieces of track uh, had 6 ties, and they were held on by these little clips right here that you see. And these can break very easily. You can make them out of wire. The wire is pretty soft, doesn't seem to be much carbon in there, it allows it to be bent. But no matter what you do, you're going to end up with a handful of broken ones if they're very old. But I have taken wire and simply made up some um, in the past to repair a broken tie. And that's what I'm going to talk about here today. These are ties that I took off of some other pieces that I recently restored. And up here on top, you can see these are some new ties that I had made. And, the rail obviously sits right inside here. And you can make these any if you want. The width, I've seen a variety of widths as long as you're just smaller than the width of this clip. As you can see, the clip here, I can make this wider or smaller. This is just what I chose to do. But anyway, these 2 pieces of rail here are extra, and I'm going to demonstrate basically how to take a tie off and how to replace it. Well, I thought before I started showing you how to restore the track, I would just show you the fruits of my labor. This is what I did here just after the last few days. There's 8 pieces of curve. I have 3 long and 3 short, and these are basically being put these together to keep for use for my grandchildren. My 3 boys rode this when they were younger. A lot of this track got stored outside, and the ties got rotted or they were not in good condition. And I decided to go ahead and put all new ties on these pieces here. So anyway, this is my piece that I'm going to keep, but I'm going to demonstrate how to replace a tie on some of the track that I've got laying over here in the driveway, which, by the way, I do have for sale if anybody would like to purchase it. Um, so anyway, just want to show you what I did do earlier. And also, you may notice that the rail is dark black. Well, that's a rust kill that I put on everything. I put on all the rail. Actually, I did it after I put them together. It simply takes brown rust and converts it into black rust. And I can come back and clear coat it or paint it, but in this case, I'm probably just going to leave it just like it is. I just wanted to give a little more protection. Well, let me start out by just showing you some of the basic tools I use. I had a hammer, screwdriver, a long extension I'm using as a handle, and also a socket right here that I'm going to take off here and use. If you look at some of the information out there, apparently they did make a tube that you could buy, a little tool. I don't have that, so I just simply did the best thing and found a socket that I thought would work. And that's what I'm going to do here when I demonstrate this. So I just basically going to take this socket, which by the way is probably, let's see here, this one here is a 3/16 quarter-inch drive, and I've got a quarter-inch drive extension. So I'll put this together and use this as my tool to remove these clips here. Basically, all I'm going to do is sliding that over the end of this clip here and using it as the way to bend that. You can use anything you want, a piece of tube if you got something. You can probably use a different size socket or a smaller socket, because this is just the smallest one I happen to have. And a screwdriver helps as a pry bar, and then a pair of pliers sometimes for closing up. And again, here's a tie to replace, and a couple extra clips I've got here. I did, as you probably noticed, I am missing clips on some of these bars down here because I had to rob them off to use them. I do have some left over on two of the rods. Like I said, I'll go along, maybe not break one for 10 or 15 ties, and then I break 3 or 4 in a row, it seems like. It just depends on how brittle they are or how rusted those clips were. Okay, well, as you can see here, I've got this ready to go. This is really a two-hand job, and I can't hold this camera very easily, but I'm going to show you what I basically do. I'm putting this piece right here over the end here, and I'm using this to bend this down. I carefully bend it down just about. You don't have to go too far, but usually that's just enough to get it down. And then I'll come over, bend the other side down. And this is what I usually break, either take them off or put them back on. Once you get them bent down a little bit, sometimes I'll have to put the screwdriver in here and I'll hold it, and then I can ride it down a little bit further, which is what I'm going to do in this case here. But once I use that, I get down far enough, I can usually pull this out and get that out. And then again, I'll do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so once I get that bent, pull that out, pull it tight. And then I made these up a long time ago. Basically, just do your measurements and cut you a slot. You want to make sure these as tight as you can make them to this metal. You don't want them to be too big, because then this rail can move back and forth. But basically, you can see I've got them in pretty tight, and I put it in place like that. And then I take a hammer, hammer them down, once they're in place. I get them lined up. You got 2 holes here, as you can see. And I'll get it lined up right in the middle between the 2 holes. And then simply reverse everything. Put the clips back in. And then I come on with my bar here, and I bend this back up. This is where they're going to break usually, when you're bending them back up or bending them down, obviously. But once you get them bent up. Now, some of these you see, they've got them completely closed up really tight, and you have to get into a screwdriver to pry them apart. Like here, the one you can see right here, how it's really tight, and you got to get in there initially and do a little separation like that. But really, there's no reason to get that tight. But if you want to, you can tighten them up a little bit with a pair of pliers, like I'm doing right here. Once they're in like this, that's plenty. It's going to hold just fine. And like I said, you'll have to, sometimes some of these are bent up pretty bad. It might take a little bit of extra effort to get them in there. Now this one here's, again, it's a little bit going to be giving me a little bit of a problem here. I may have to bend this down some more, but I can't really do it with one hand right at the moment. Anyway, see, I'm kind of maneuvering, got it through. There we go. And then again, I simply come along, put my little makeup tool here, and bend it up. And bend it up. That's basically it. Now, I will talk about this. It's not necessary. These are made of hardwood, and they are pretty bad looking. But usually, even in real railroads, you only have to replace about every other tie, as long as you don't have 2 bad ties in a row. This piece would work just fine. I usually have to replace the one on the end, because that's where you're bolting up to another piece of track. Try to go no more than a couple at a row that are real bad. As you can see, this pile here, these are ones I took off from when I restored before. Some of them are somewhat reusable. Like this one here, obviously, is in pretty good shape still. But some of these, you can just see they're really worn out. There's almost nothing left as far as the groove. That piece of track can just flop back and forth terrible. But anyway, this piece here, you know, is very usable. It's ready to go. You can replace one or all. I went ahead, like I said, and replaced all the ones that I kept for myself because I had the ties. But like here's one here. You can see the short piece here. It's got no pieces replaced. I would probably like to do at least the end one on both ends and one in the middle. There's one I did a couple before. You can see all the curves I replaced. In many cases, I replaced the one on the end. Now, we'll talk about one other thing. This metal can bend very easily. I don't know if you can make out this on this curve here, but you can see it's bent in a little bit. A little tap with a hammer, and usually you can get that gauge right back in. I made this gauge here a long time ago to kind of see where I'm at, and you can see obviously my gauge is out here. I would need to take this and hammer this out, but here I'm in fine shape. Actually, a little wide. Here's one of the problems you get into when you have these grooves too big. See how this piece of track can move back and forth? Again, this piece would probably need to be replaced just from the standpoint that the groove is so worn out, and that one's worn out. But I can promise you that if I put this track together in a circle, it would probably do just fine with these little hand cars, kids riding on these things. I'm 250 pounds. I've sit on these cars and actually cranked them around myself. But typically, most of your kids are going to be under 100 pounds of weight, and they'll do just fine on these track. Well, I'm going to talk about one other option. In this track I have, the person who owned it before me must have decided he wanted something more permanent than wood. So I have two pieces of track here that have been done. Pretty unique idea. Instead of using wood, he simply took what looks to me like a heavy conduit and cut them to length, put his grooves in there, and made metal ties. And I have two of these completed like this. And I can tell you right now that that would probably hold up for a long, long time. Probably the first thing would wear out would be your little metal clips because they're pretty thin and they'd be touching the ground. But this might be an option if you don't want to use wood ties like this. Then you can come along and maybe do this. But just like I say, cut a bunch of this conduit to length, come back, chop your depth there, and make you a piece of Yardbird track using metal. And it's not that much, actually about the same weight as the wood. So it's just another option. I thought it was kind of a unique idea. I do want to mention this video was just basically how to restore Yardbird track if you already have some. I have this pile listed for sale on Facebook Marketplace, as well as I have it on a couple of sites like Backyard Railroading and 7.5 Gauge Railroading. You can search all that. But anyway, if you do want to make your own, just keep in mind a couple of things. They offset this on one side so that another piece straight can come in, and that's how they match up. And then there's two screws that go through here. You can use anything you want. I just happen to have a pile of screws right here that work pretty well. And like I said, you're gonna have to have two holes for each one of the bars. You could probably space this out any way you want. The best thing would be is to try to at least find yourself a couple of pieces of rail, original, short and long. Like I said before, it takes a short and a long to make a curve, or you can take two shorts and make a straight, or you can take two longs and make a straight. And that's basically it. Like I said before, when you're replacing this, you might want to make sure you replace maybe every other tie. At least put the ones on the ends and maybe one in the middle. That way it'll hold the gauge. As you can see, this hole here is screws are really worn out, but this one's nice and tight. So, even in real railroading, you don't have to replace every tie, as long as you don't have two bad ones in a row. And that's kind of the same thing goes with this. But I can tell you that this would actually all bolt up and make a nice piece of oval track here that kids could ride on, and you wouldn't have to replace any of these ties, at least the way they are at the moment. But if you have the time and you want to replace them all, just like I did, after about I don't know, it seemed like about 4 or 5 hours, I replaced all these ties. And it's a lot of work, but once you get going and you get doing it, it works out pretty easily. Um, I might have mentioned earlier in the video, I did use a rust kill that turned the brown oxide rust into a black oxide rust. And there's several products out there on the market. You can probably do your research and find it. What I used was a product that I'll show you here in a second. Here's the product I used to convert the brown oxide rust into black. It turns into a material that can be then painted later. I will probably never paint this. As long as it's not in bad weather, it usually will hold it for a long time. But here's the information. This was about $100 a gallon, and I bought this probably, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So I'm not sure if they're still in business, but this is the product that I did use. As a individual, I believe he was, he used to be in Florida, but it looks like here it's maybe came out of Wisconsin. But I'm sure there are other products out there that you can do research and that will work. I just applied this with a paintbrush and a can, and it works great. I've used it on a lot of restoration projects in the past. And like I said, I come back and I can just paint right over top of that later on. I could even clear coat if I wanted to. But it worked out pretty good for me, and that's what I used. But that's not necessary. Just you probably don't want to leave this track out in the weather if you can avoid it, because as time goes on, the hardwood's gonna rot. You could use soft wood like a cedar or something, but I can't imagine this groove holding up very well. And as you see, the tighter you can make this slot, the better. This would work, but as you can see, it won't take long for that to start to rock around real easy. And it does work, but like I said, these work much better. I made them exactly where I could just tap them on there real nice and tight. So anyway, if you got any questions about any of this, like I said, I do have all this track here listed for sale right now on Facebook Marketplace, as well as a couple of sites out there. And I don't know where you're going to find very much of this. It's kind of hard to come by. Took me several years to accumulate what I do have here, but like I said, this is extra. I don't need all this, and what I have over there will serve my purpose the rest of my life.